Okay? So on the upside of silver, it's been mined as a byproduct of other base metals. I read this in your book, and I thought this was fascinating, that silver is mined as a byproduct of copper, lead, and zinc. I never knew that.
Well, I'm obviously very studied in the silver market. Yeah, it's priced inelastic, and you can make an argument on either side. Now, I will explain. Roughly 70% of the silver market is a result of base metal mining, as you said. It's either lead, zinc, or copper. 25% of the silver above ground comes as a result of copper mining. 32% comes as a result of lead zinc mining. About 13% of the above ground silver supply, annually comes as a result of gold mining. And then primary silver mines make up roughly 25%. So a mine like, let's say, most of Pan American Silver's mines, even they aren't pure silver mines. There is no such thing as a pure silver mine. So when it's a primary silver mine, it might be a lead silver mine as an example. And when it's primary silver, what that means is that the bottom line of the company's profits are based on the fact that at least 50% or more is a result of silver. Now, it's much higher than 50% for Pan American. A lot of primary silver mines are like in the 80, maybe even 90% for another one I can think of off the top of my head. So they are primarily mining silver, but it's not just silver. They're either getting some copper with it or maybe some lead zinc with it or that type of thing. So the point is that a copper, zinc, lead miner, even a gold miner, doesn't really care about the price of silver. All they care about is their primary metal that feeds their bottom line. Is that profitable or not? So if copper mining is profitable and silver mining is not, if you're a primary silver miner, silver is still going to come to the surface because the copper is still going to be mined. Same thing with lead or zinc or even gold. Now it works in reverse. Let's say that one of the biggest copper mines in the world produces probably 20 million ounces of silver as a result of their copper mining. Let's say copper goes in the doldrums and they start to cut back their copper mining. Well, obviously they're not going to bring as much silver to the surface as well. So it works both ways. As these markets have heated up over the last decade, a great deal of silver has come to the surface as a result of the huge commodities boom that we witnessed up until the recent debacle, I'll call it, in the financial markets. It started in the end of 2008. And since then, there's been some recovery, as we all know, and how much we don't know the actual numbers because most of the reports that report on metals production aren't out yet. They usually come out in April and May. So I don't have the stats in front of me, but I can pretty much assure you I don't think they're going to be up for 2009 inclusive. I think they're going to be flat or maybe down, but time will tell. We'll see if I'm right or not.
Do you think it's true, David, that there's only a few years left of above-the-ground silver?
Well, it depends how you look at it. I mean, I just
explain it, because I noticed it in your book, and I want you to explain it.
Well, let me just cite the source. The USGS, United States Geological Survey, says that there's roughly 10 years worth of silver in the ground. And they use the word economic, and that's important. What that means is that at $17, $18 silver, there's about 10 years worth in the Earth's surface. However, let's do a thought experiment here. Let's say that silver goes to $30 an ounce. Obviously, there'll probably be more than 10 years worth of silver available because it's now economic to mine lower grade silver. Having said all that, I think what we should focus on is above-ground supply. And the above-ground supply of silver in 1990 was roughly 2 billion ounces. And that's investable form. That's bullion and coins. Today, there is roughly 500 million ounces in bullion and probably 500 million ounces in coins. So we're down considerably the last 15 years. And that has been flat for the last couple of years. So the amount of silver that's available in months of supply above ground, that's in investment form, meaning bullion or coins.
Ready to buy.
Probably less than 6 months.
Say that one more time. Less than 6 months?
Less than 6 months.
You've got to be kidding.
No, I'm not. But, there's other commodities like that as well. It sounds like a very short amount, but that's still kind of the float you might consider. It'd be like in your checking account having a 6-month pad on your income. So if you lost your job, you might use up 3 months of it, but then you get a job 3 months later. So I want to give the correct picture here. But that is the correct picture. It's just that It does, if all mining stopped, 6 months later we're out of silver, but all mining hasn't stopped, and it probably won't stop. But the point is simple. The amount of silver above ground in investable form is roughly 6 months, whereas on gold you probably have 40 years above ground supply.
Why is that?
Well, gold, there's a lot of arguments. I'll take the gold bug argument because I am a bit of a gold bug. I think silver is a better investment, but I advocate owning both, gold and silver. Gold doesn't have any industrial use. I mean, it has some, but very few industrial uses. It's basically hoarded as a protection or as the money of last resort. Silver has both functions, money of last resort and industrial applications. So silver is basically used up from a practical perspective. Now, from a physics point of view, every ounce of silver that's ever been mined above ground is somewhere on the planet. But if you want to take it out of all the skyscraper windows or reflect heat, it's the greenest metal out there, be my guest. You're looking at microns worth of silver over all the skyscrapers in New York City and every other major city on the planet. I mean, that silver's not coming back into supply. So, that's the case for silver. I mean, it's a very useful metal, and therefore it's used again and again and again. So, the facts are what they are. The amount of investable silver has become very, very small.
Because silver is used as an industrial metal, I would think that it will become more and more important as time goes on. As the supply gets shorter, it will become more valuable. But the fact is, I think it's valuable no matter what because we need it and we use it, and it is an industrial metal, besides being a form of money. So, I mean, I see it as being smart to have on two prongs like what you're talking about. Can you explain, you made this distinction in your book, and you said a deficit is not necessarily a shortage in the context of when a mining supply has not met the demand.
Yes, and that's a great question, and it's one that
seemed like a key to understand.
Well, it does, and it's not a semantics game. It's the truth. I'm going to digress, and I'm going to answer your question. I'm
okay.
Very specific, and I'm going to be just rock solid, so everybody's going to get it. But I have to digress. Every year, the Silver Institute gets a plethora of calls that their silver survey is wrong, that there's a shortage of silver. And, of course, they laugh. The fundamental fact is, and this is why I wonder about the educational system sometimes, supply and demand have to equal every single year in anything. And it does. Now, a deficit is defined as annual production. So the annual production of silver, either by primary or base metal mining or recycling, doesn't matter where it comes from, that amount is less than the amount of total demand. That's a deficit. The way a deficit works is that supply and demand have to equal, so the above-ground stockpile of silver makes up the difference. That was the case from roughly 1990 to 2006. Every year there was a deficit, and every year the stockpile got smaller and smaller and smaller. It went from 1.5 billion ounces to roughly 500 million ounces in bullion form. Since about 2007 or so, depending on which study you want to cite, there has been equilibrium, no deficit. The amount of silver mined from all sources and recycling is equal to or slightly greater than the amount of total demand. And people have gotten upset by that. And I say, well, I don't control the silver mining industry, nor do I wish to. I'm a big free market proponent. And all markets strive for equilibrium. That's what makes a free market a free market. If there is a demand for XYZ and there's not enough of it, some entrepreneur is going to go make a bunch of XYZ and produce it and give it to the market and make a profit.
But doesn't it take 10 years to bring what's mined to the market?
Yes, these days it's probably, I used to say 5 to 10, and certainly in some instances, depends on the jurisdiction, and if it's, there's lots of reasons. It could be as quick as 5, but in most cases, you're looking probably closer to 10 years.
That's a long time, isn't it?
It is a long time.
And I think that technology is already here today to expedite that, both in science, in terms of sorting out how to locate the mines, and in advanced forms of drilling. I have another question, which is, talk about the National Defense Stockpile Center. What is it?
Well, there's, a fair amount to talk about. First of all, silver used to be in the strategic stockpile. Look up the word strategic in Google if you don't know what